Okay. Before we go into chapter 3, was there any questions or problems with chapter 2 that you've discovered or found? Or okay. I haven't looked to see to make sure everybody's working on their assignments yet. I'll probably do that this weekend, but don't fall too far behind. It is really easy to get behind, and then you're playing catch up the rest of the semester. So there's not a ton of assignments to do, but like if you stay on top of them would be better than not. And right now there's really only 4 assignments that are there, so it's pretty easy to catch up and stay on top of it going forward. So do make sure you work on that. All right, so today we're going to be moving into chapter 3. We're going to be looking at some graphing problems. Here's a graph. Yes.
We didn't finish 2.
Oh, okay. It was just the cross-sectional ones. It's okay. I'll
Just making sure.
No, honestly, you really didn't miss anything. The only thing that I didn't actually show you was a cross-sectional graph. Well, cross-sectional table. So actually, hold on, let me pull one up real quick so I can actually show you that. That is right. I did forget that the internet died on me. Where was it? It was this one. Which leads into today anyway, so that's not a big deal. This is the last slide. So this is basically what your cross-sectional data was. So cross-sectional data is just looking at a group, a specific point in time, and looking at a slice across the entire region. Most of the time when you're looking at this, it's going to be geographical type data. So in this case, they're looking at countries. We can look at one, in this case, like this right here is actually a time-lapse graph. It's just not over time. I mean, it's not equally distant points, but it's looking at one thing over time. And I think that was it. Yeah, because those are just a bunch of graphs, which we're going to talk about today anyway. So that's literally what's cross-sectional. That's actually the only thing I actually missed. All right, here's a cool graph. And will I take a guess what it's about? I don't think, unless somebody in here really knows French and can read that well, probably not going to really gather a lot from the wording. So any type of graph, yeah. Nope. Good guess though. Any type of graph is designed to show you a bunch of information in a short amount of time. So the whole concept of a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's a graph. So I want to be able to give you data in a visual representation so you can understand what's going on without seeing all the numbers. And in most situations, people don't want to see the numbers. Numbers scare a lot of people. So if I can give it to you in a nice picture that shows you all that information, great. You're going to be happy with that. So I gave you one clue. I said it's French. And it's from the 1800s. Yeah. You can guess. Honestly, if anybody gets this off the top of their head, I'm going to be shocked.
You said 1800s and
French. So specifically 1812 to 1813. Yes,
Does it have to do with the French Revolution?
that was earlier. It does have to do with a very short Frenchman, though.
Oh,
This is the Napoleonic Wars. So this is actually Napoleon's march to Moscow.
it's a
So, well, it is a path with data. So this is when he's left France. And the size of it is actually the size of his army while he's walking through Europe to Moscow. So the brown path is the path to Moscow, and the black path is the path back from Moscow. So he left with approximately, hold on a second, they actually gave me the exact number. He left with approximately just over 400,000 troops and came back to France with 10,000. And that's what that graph shows. The black line at the very end is only about 10,000 troops, where it started off 40, just over 400,000 troops. So it was basically giving you a timeline going forward across the map of Europe into Moscow to say, okay, this is how the army looked as we went forward. Okay. And as you can see, Napoleon didn't do very well trying to invade Moscow. So this graph gives you a lot more information than if I gave you a table with dates and army troops and locations and stuff like that. Okay, you can quickly understand, all right, something bad happened, and you can get a general idea of like where, if you could read this, like the names of where they are across. It's like, okay, he lost a lot of people here. It's like, and honestly, most of it was because he left during the winter and he died of cold. So he didn't plan his invasion very well. So you can start to see how graphs can be used. Like we have a lot, we see pie charts and those type of things. Those are the ones we typically see. But a graph can be a lot of different things. And that's actually one of the things we're starting to see now with using computers and AI and everything else and technology. We're starting to see a lot of different style graphs to show different types of data and have that analysis there. So, all right. So let's start looking at how we can get the information for graphs. So the first thing whenever we're going to be making a graph is we need some kind of way to organize data into groups. Okay, so a frequency distribution is a technique that organizes data into classes and provides it in a tabular form. Once we get it into a table, it makes it really easy to put into a bar graph or a pie chart, depending on how we want to actually use the data. So both of these tables here are frequency distributions. One has a lot more information than the other one, but they're both frequency distributions. So in this case, that's the population in April of 2010, which would have been when the census was done. And then a population estimate in July of 2016 for each of the states and how much it changed. Where this one is just a simple survey results, where they were counting them up. So you can start to see how we can use different types of frequency or distributions to collect the data and organize it. Hopefully none of the stuff is like completely and utterly foreign and you've seen at least some of the stuff before. So if we look at, this chart, this graph, or this table, this frequency distribution, what are some things you could gather from it? What's some good information about it that we get? Yeah.
about 1,100 people voted. like responded to this.
Okay, so finding out the total will be helpful. It's actually 1,250. Close though. When you did quick math, that wasn't bad. All right, so knowing the total is probably going to be helpful. All right. So the question was, in general, how do you rate the quality of American public schools? So what are some other things that we might want to do with this data to make it easier to organize and understand? Or do you think that data as it's written right there is really good and easily understood by everybody? Okay, go ahead.
Percentages would help more. Like if we divided it by the total number of people, so instead of just 462 people, of the 1,250 that responded, this percentage of people said this, so you get a better feel of, in general, like if you went up to a group of 100 people, you could guess how they felt.
All right, so there. That's known as a relative frequency. So relative frequency takes the numbers and divides it by the total. This is a percent. So if I told you 462 people rated the schools as excellent, or if I told you 37% of people rated the schools as excellent, which one would be more valuable or more informative to you? Okay. Why?
Unless you could do the quick math to add up the total, you might not have a real good visual representation of what that even means.
Okay. We inherently know what a percent means now. Like you've seen it enough times in school that you have an idea of, okay, percent out of 100. It's an easy number that we understand. Okay, so it allows us to compare things between different surveys and stuff like that. Because if I did the exact same survey, but I surveyed 2,000 people and only 406, and say 500 people said yes or was excellent, not having a percent doesn't give me that easily way to compare the two. Because like, oh yeah, more people said yes, but if it was 500 out of 2,000, that's only 25%. So the percent actually went down, but the number went up. So by looking at the relative frequency, it gives us that percent, so we get a little bit better way to compare our numbers. Okay. Why did it jump way down there? That's not there. All right, so let's look at a different survey. So here is 3 different ways to visualize data. So it says, how serious is the lack of parental involvement in child's education? I'll tell you right now, this was not asked to a group of teachers because the top line would have been a lot longer. But so we've got our frequency distribution here. We've got our percentages here, and then we've got our, what's this called? For this piece.
Oh, I could see.
That's okay. What's that called? This.
Oh, bar.
Bar. Sorry. So that's a bar graph. Why is it called a bar graph? Because it has bars. Okay. Let's tie this back into what we did on Monday's class. What type of data is this? Is it qualitative or quantitative? Yes.
Qualitative because it's sporting.
Okay. It's qualitative Why would, okay, you said because it's ordinal. Why is it ordinal then?
Because it's like, it reminds me of one of the examples I put down, which is kind of like the surveys. Very bad, too bad.
Okay. Is the info or is the question numerical? No. And remember, that's actually one of the big things. Like, if it's not numerical, it has to be qualitative. Okay, because the quantitative ones, I have to be able to do intervals or ratios and stuff like that on it, so I can't have that. So that's definitely qualitative. It is ordinal, actually. That's very good because we can put them in order, like very serious, somewhat serious. There's an order to it. So it is actually ordinal in terms of the level of measurement. Very good. Bar graphs is actually in pie charts, the two we're going to look at today, are actually the two that you can do either types of data on. You can do qualitative or quantitative data on it. There is a lot of graphs that we're going to look at that you cannot do qualitative data on. You need actual numerical values and stuff like that to do it on it. But a bar chart, you can do qualitative data. All right. So if you had these three, which one would you rather see? Which one would be the best visualization of the data? Why?
Got a pretty picture to go along with it.
Pictures are nice. And it gives you a quick thing. You can just look at it quickly and go, okay, very serious is very, like most people are thinking it's very serious. Like it's that quick visual. And as a society, we want things quick. Everything's moving a lot faster now. So being able to look at something quickly and get that information and that data there is very important to see that quickly. So this is why bar charts are very nice. That's not the graph that I want. Hold on a second. No, that wasn't the one I wanted. That's what it was. Sorry, I needed a different graph, and I don't know why it wasn't there. This is the graph that I want. All right. Anybody remember who Terry Schiavo was? Okay. Well, you guys are way too young. So Terry Schiavo was a woman in her, I think she was 40 something. Hold on, let me get the exact head. She was, yeah, 42. In Florida, and there was a big court case over it where she was basically in a vegetative state, and there was a fight over removing her from life support. Okay. And the courts ended up ruling that they can remove her from life support. So this graph shows the percentage of people who agreed with the court. Taking a quick look at this graph, what information would you get from it? Yeah.
Republicans and independents stay the same.
Okay, Republicans and independents carried the same amount. What else can we get from it? There's very, very few wrong answers you can give me. So don't like, this is literally your interpretation of what you see on that graph. Yeah. Okay. Democrats were vastly higher than the Republicans and independents from agreeing with the court.
Free party makes the reason more than they did agree.
Why? Okay. That's actually a very important distinction. Who would have actually put out this type of graph? Or why would somebody put out this type of graph?
They wanted to make the last two parties look less caring,
Correct.
when in reality, they're not that far apart.
So when you looked at the graph, you noticed that 50 at the bottom. But it took you a minute to look at that and notice that. If you were going to look quickly at this, you're going to see that the Democrats' bar is way higher. Actually, it's 3 times as high as the other ones. And that's what you noticed first. Okay. This graph is the same exact data. Okay. But this one goes all the way to 0. If you saw this one, it gives you a different viewpoint than the other one. All right. So when we start to look at graphs and pictures, we have to be very careful on how those graphs and pictures are created to give you that sense or that understanding of what's going on. Okay. Yes.
So the first graph is particularly misleading because when we get to the second one, it gives us the margin of error, and that almost covers the entire gap.
Yeah.
So,
Which we're going to talk about margin of error a lot later on in the semester. But yeah, so in this one, the margin of error was actually 7%. And there's only 8% between them. So, and since it's plus minus, it basically, these are what we typically would call a statistical tie. Like they're basically all the exact same thing. All right. So when you're looking at graphs, the big thing I use this case all the time because I remember when it was happening and it was a big deal. And there was that divide that people like to go on as everything goes back to politics. And it's worse now than it was even back then. But you can start to see that divide happening in with the information. And when you're showing, especially today, like this is one of those things that you see quite often where people are just sharing memes that are just a quick little picture with some information on it. And there's not a lot of context to it. And by not having that extra information, it's like you start to skew opinions. And you can do that with numerical data. This graph's not wrong. The data is accurate in this graph. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's like we sit there and say, well, they're showing wrong information or it's false news or fake news and everything else like that. This is right. Every number on this graph is completely correct. Okay. It is a misleading graph. It's designed to make you think a certain way because, again, you're not going to look at those numbers at the side. You're just looking at the bars. So this graph gave a lot more information in it. It gave you the margin of error. It gave you the values on the bars. It was a correct graph that went all the way down to 0. So you could look at, yes, you're going to look at it quick and get, okay, they're all basically about the same. And then there was other information that you could glean about that. So, yes.
I feel like that it included the full question that was being responded to.
Yes. Well, I just copy and pasted a graph from
Oh, okay.
the thing. So it's like, so the other one might have had more information around it originally. I use that specifically because it cuts it off at the 50. And technically everybody agreed that this should have happened. Like the majority of people definitely agreed. It wasn't as drastic as that graph was showing. So you do have to be careful when you start seeing just a picture or just a graph of information, especially when you're looking at how that graph is made. Okay. All right. So a couple little things, quick things about bar graphs. There's actually rules on how to create a bar graph. So bar charts can be constructed horizontally or vertically. You can go either direction. So I've shown you a horizontal one. I showed you a vertical one. That's fine. You want to label each of the bars with certain information. So like the last one, this was labeled with the parties, and that was telling you the percentage that agreed, where this one was a horizontal bar graph. The titles were on the side over here. So it's very similar in the setup. If the categories have some associated order, put them in that order. Okay. So, for example, when we looked at this one, you said this was ordinal, which is correct, and they're in an order that makes sense. Okay. You wouldn't want to put very serious in the middle and not sure, things like that. Don't mix them up. Actually put them in an order that makes sense. For this graph, it didn't make much difference how they put them in order. Okay, it's because there's no specific order for it. It's nominal in this situation, so they could put it in any order. It wouldn't have mattered. The last piece, if there is an other category, you want to list that at the end. Even if it's a large number, it's still always listed at the end of the bar chart. So either at the bottom for horizontally or at the far right for vertically. All right, here's another graph. Not politically drawn. Are both these graphs graphed correctly based on what I just told you? Are they both accurate bar graphs? So we had, these are both vertical graphs, right? Is there any order to the names? No, so order doesn't really matter in this situation. There's no other category, and if they're listed, they can be listed alphabetically. These aren't listed alphabetically, but that really doesn't make much of a difference in this case. Okay, so in terms of what I just said, they're accurately drawn bar graphs. They're both showing you the exact same data. Who would put out the second graph? Who would put out the graph on the right? Yeah.
Either Susan or Beth. Because it's either trying to emphasize the difference in pay. Like the people who are getting paid are obviously going to care more about the difference between how much they each receive, while the company probably prefers the left graph where, you know, you actually see the full extent rather than just the difference.
I think you're missing what the graph says. Graphs talk about sales. What would the company care more? Which one? What would the company care more about? That's what, like, I think you read it like you were thinking about payment, like this is sales. So the company wants people to sell more, right? So if I want to get rid of my lowest sales performer, I'm showing the graph on the right. Saying, bye-bye, Beth. Oh, Susan, sorry. I must fire Susan. Bye, Susan. Okay. And I say, look, you're like way behind Beth. When in reality, she's less than 20,000 behind, which is less than 10%. Okay. Where if I'm the employees or if I'm Susan, I'm like, look, we're all basically the same. The proper way to make a bar graph is where it goes down to zero. Okay, so when you're properly making a bar graph, the graph should go down to zero. If it does not go down to zero, they're typically considered a misleading graph. Okay, or you should have some kind of marker or visualization that says it didn't go to zero, which you could easily do a lot of times where you'll see a little breakpoint. Okay. You'll see a little break point, or you'll see like a break across the things. It's just that visualization that, okay, there is a break because it's too difficult for me to start at zero and go all the way up, but I want to show that the gap. But it forces you to realize that there is a break and that it is not from zero. Okay. If there is no visualization of that, like in this case, it makes it harder for you to recognize that without looking at all the rest of the data around the graph. Okay. This is known as a Pareto graph. It is also a bar graph. It's just a special type of bar graph. So a Pareto bar graph is one where the bars are arranged in descending order of frequency. So you have your highest on the left, your lowest on the right. This is one of those ways that you can help identify rank. So there's not necessarily a situation where the order of the countries matters down the bottom. So putting them in alphabetical order based on the way the bar chart graphs would state would be there, but it wouldn't give you that visualization of what's really going on in the data. So this is just another way to represent and look at how we break down that information so you can start to see what's going on. So in this graph, what's going on? What's the graph talk about? Okay. So go to the movie theater. Basically what it's talking about. All right. Which country has the most people go to the movie theaters? Huh? India does. And we're next. And then China. And then the rest of the countries drop way off. What other information might be useful when looking at the population? Why?
I think there's like a lot of.
Yeah, India has about 1.4 billion people right now. So the graph has basically 2,000 million. So 2 billion approximately people went to the movie theater. So that would be just over like 1.5 times for each person. Where we have 300,000 or 300 million, 350 million people in the United States, and we're at about 1,200 or 1.2 billion. So that means every person goes about 4 times to the movie theater. So while our population is a lot less, and knowing the population could actually change how this graph is viewed and the information. If we looked at it per person, it'd be a little bit different in that respect. And that makes sense when we're looking at the rest of the countries, right? China's another one that's over 1 billion people. So it's like those are some of the largest populations in the world. I think we're 5th largest in the world. Let's see. I think we're 5th. Oh, no, we're actually 3rd. I lied. We are 3rd. What's the next country? Mexico. Let's see where Mexico's 11th with approximately 130 million people. So you can start to see, well, that's a major drop off, but you would expect that with that type of thing. So, all right, who would this graph be useful for? Yeah.
Maybe filmmakers so they know where to release their movie to get the most attendance cinema.
Mm-hmm. So Hollywood. So if the United States is 2nd, why don't we see a lot of Indian movies? And amazingly, you don't see a lot of Hollywood movies in India. They have their own Hollywood, and they have their own movie theater, movie productions and everything else like that. So there's not a lot of crossover between those. China is basically the next biggest market for Hollywood movies. So the interesting thing is, whenever you see a list of movies around the world, you only see American movies on that list. Where if they had listed the ones from India, ours would not be nearly as high up on that list as their movies would be. So you can start to see how, again, we use data and graphs to show what we want to see. All right. The Winter Olympics. And I'm hoping Italy doesn't get their bobsledding tracks and stuff fixed before the Olympics next year. Because if they don't, all the sledding events will be in Lake Placid, New York. So you can actually go up to Lake Placid, New York and see the Winter Olympics. All right, so this was from the Winter Medal account in 2014. What type of graph is this? Somebody else. Here's the medal. What type of graph? Yeah, so is it a bar graph or a paleograph? Okay. So it's a bar graph. Is it in order of medal count? Is the highest medal count on the left and the lowest medal count on the right? Because that's the difference between the two graphs we talked about, right? They're both bar graphs, but the Pareto graph has it in that order, correct? So is this graph in order by medal count? Is it in order by gold medals? Yes. So there is an order to it. It's just ordered by medal count, or gold medals in this case. So Russia had the most gold medals, and China had the least gold medals in this one. This is the one that was in, actually in Russia. I can't remember the name of the town that it was in. It's on the Black Sea. Is this graph an easy graph to look at? Why?
Lot going on.
Yeah, so this is a multiple bar graph, right? We've got each one separated there, and we have the gold, silver, and the bronze all broken out into separate bars. So there's a lot going on, and it's a little hard to actually see what's going on. It took until I actually probably said that are the gold medals in order. Most of you probably didn't even recognize that was in order. Then you just focused in on the yellow bars, like, oh yeah, they do go down. But in total medal count, they really don't, because like China is probably above Belarus in that respect. This graph shows the exact same data. What type of graph is this called? These are all the things you never played with in Google Sheets or Excel. This is known as a stacked bar graph. Stacked, like stacking boxes on top of each other. So again, it's still organized in order by the golds, and the golds are on the bottom, and then they just stack the silvers and the bronze on top of them. Is this graph easier to look at than the last one, or harder? A little easier. What does it make it harder to get, though? Who had the most silver medals? Who had the most silver medals? Russia did. Okay. So depending on what type of data you want, depends on the type of graph that's going to be easier for you to look at that information, right? So this one, we've got it all broken out, makes more sense if you're looking for individual metal counts, where this one makes more sense if you're looking for the total metal counts, but you wanted to have it broken out by the colors, the gold, silver, and the bronze. The gold, since it's on the bottom, makes it still is easy to be able to recognize those, but the silver and the bronze makes it a little harder to determine that type of order. Pie chart. So a pie chart or a circle graph, we don't really call them circle graphs. We typically call them pie charts, is used to display categorical data in a circle. The size of each slice is proportional to the amount of frequency in that category. So the larger the amount, the bigger the slice is going to be. But it has to be proportional. So therefore, if one had a frequency of 100 and one had a frequency of 50, the 100 one has to be twice as big as the 51. Okay. So that's the key when you're looking at pie charts, is they have to be proportional. Typically, they're listed as percentages, and the percentages should add up to 100%, which my administrators hated every time I told them that, because they liked pie graphs, they liked pie charts. I want everything as a pie chart. Data doesn't work as a pie chart. All right, and then the best pie chart in the world, a pie chart about pies. What's your favorite pie? And there's a correct answer to this if you want to pass my class. Yes. Nope, wrong answer. You failed. Sorry. Favorite pie? Chocolate. It's always chocolate. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, I thought you were, okay.
I know. Pumpkin's actually the only one of these I would eat. I'm really not a fruit fan. So in that respect, pumpkin would be the only one I would actually eat. So not a bad choice. All right. So is this a good pie chart of pies? Yes.
I mean, it's visually interesting, but it's kind of hard to read.
Yeah, because of the colors.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very colorful or pie-ish graph. Is it done correctly though? So which one is the biggest? Yes.
It almost looks like pumpkin looks the biggest, but he's
Right. And apple is 24%. So it's not done correctly. Okay. And actually, even visually, like you can say, okay, visually it might not be because of the way that they look, but it actually, even like size wise, it's not. I might have stretched it a little bit though. But even that, apple's still smaller than pumpkin, and apple should be bigger. All right. What should they all add up to? Okay. Somebody do a quick addition, see if they actually add up to 100.
What's the lemon one say? I can't
9%. So 24, 22, 19, 16, 10, and 9. They do? Okay. Good. Because they don't always. And that is something to definitely look at when you're looking at it. So graph's almost right. It's just not proportional. Apple should definitely have been bigger than the pumpkin, and apple should be more than twice as big as blueberry in this respect. All right. It's tax season. So way back when when you used to have to file your taxes on a piece of paper, you'd go to the post office and you get a book. And it would have all the forms in it. And it would have all the tables that you'd need and all the directions and stuff that you need. And one of the things that they actually are required to put on that booklet is the government spending and the government revenue. So you know where your tax dollars are going. Now that it's all done online, nobody ever sees those anymore. However, they still actually have to put them out, and they're on the IRS's website, and you actually still can go to the post office and pick up the 1040 forms and stuff like that. They're still there. So this was in 2015. Which of these two graphs is easier to look at? Both graphs show the exact same data. But which one's easier to look at?
On the right.
Okay, why?
I didn't even know it was percentages in the bar chart until I got further and started looking at it.
Yeah, they actually are percentages. It's as I said, the graphs show the exact same data. Whenever you're looking at percentages, we like pie charts. The pie charts make more sense. Okay, so this is a good visualization of the data. Let's see if I can find the. And this is the taxes. So if we look at government spending, Social Security is in blue, Medicare is in red. Our defense budget, other programs, which is basically everything other than defense. And that's the interest on our debt. So 6% of all the money that we spent was paid towards the national debt in 2015. Yes.
You mentioned with bar charts that the other needs to go last. Does that count for this one, or is it more important that it goes to descending?
So in this case, it's not, they're not using it as other, they're just using it as, I get what you're saying, but it's a little different because of the way that it's actually, like, there's a whole bunch of taxes in there, they just decided to put them together, and the government doesn't always follow directions. So we'll give them that piece. So yes, that technically should have been at the end, but they just didn't do that. And a pie graph, it doesn't actually matter because it's just an order, or it's there anyway. All right, so this is the amount of money coming in. So your income taxes. Payroll taxes is your Medicare and Social Security. Your FICA and Medicare on your checks. Other taxes and excise taxes and corporate income taxes are there. All right, let's see if I can find. They decided to start doing fancy graphs. I think I put it here. Nope. Okay. They decided to start doing fancy graphs. So this is our budget in 2023. They haven't released 2024 yet, so this is the last one I can get. So our mandatory spending, which is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, basically all those type of programs, is $3.8 trillion. How much we spent in 2023? How much was it 2020 or 2015? How much was the entire budget in 2015? Okay, the entire budget was 3.36 trillion. This program now, just those programs right there, is now more than our budget was in 2015. Our defense budget is now $917 billion, or our non-defense. Our defense budget in 2023 was $805 billion. So non-defense is everything else. Okay. So go back here and look. Defense was there and everything else was there. So those, we don't have the exact number for these, but the percent wise is pretty similar to them. And there's our net interest. Our net interest was 659 billion in 2023. I think, if I remember right. Yeah, in 2024, the interest cost raised to $882 billion.
What would you call that type of graph?
This is a modified pie chart. That's what I said. So, like, as we start from the early 2010s till now, computers have gotten like the actual space and everything else is larger, but the graphs and people that want to use becomes a lot more visualized. They're using a lot of different ways to show things. So like these, you can actually like you click over and they pop out. So it's like the web has allowed us to do a lot more things with visualizations. This, I would say, would be a modified pie chart because it still has that circular shape. It's still proportional as it. I guess you could, if you put them straight, could be a nice stacked bar graph. So just different ways to look at it. All right, what was the other piece that we looked at? So we looked at the budget and then we looked at the income, right? So remember 6.1 trillion. And there's our revenues.
Can you tell me the make less than we spend?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So income taxes, payroll, corporate, and all the rest of the stuff. So yeah, that was $1.5 trillion deficit in 2023. Now you can start to see the problems that we're running into. So, all right. But this is where we can start to use visualization to start to understand what's going on and how that breakdown is. So people say we need to start taxing the corporations more. Well, that's a lot less than the individual income taxes. So, the big difference between individual income taxes and corporate income taxes, it comes out of your paycheck. It doesn't come out of their paycheck. They file it later. So, all right, more graphs. I think I have some cool graphs later on too. But. All right, here's two pie charts. So these are both pie charts. They are both accurate pie charts. They're done correctly. Which one do you like? Yes.
I mean, I know they're organized alphabetically, but still I don't like.
They're really, really, really hard to read. Yeah.
Or at least on the left.
So yes, they're definitely harder to read. Okay, so pie charts are great when you have a limited number of values that are going in there. And that's why a lot of times after a certain number of them, you'll see the other category where they just basically clump all the rest of the ones together to make it so you see like the higher value ones, but not all of the values. Okay, so let's see. I wanted to show you some cool graphs. All right, here's a cool graph. So this graph represents the world's largest data breaches. The bigger the bubble, the more information. So as we go down in years, you can start to see how there's not as much because the internet wasn't as big in 2004. So this is another type of graph, another visualization of a graph. Let's see if I can find another one. Really? I hit the wrong button. This is another bubble graph breaking down the budget. That's not a very nice graph. This is a cool graph. I don't need it that big though. Wrong button. Hold on. There we go. So this is a, it is known, hold on, they actually gave it a name, and I'm going to screw it up if I don't read the name. Circular network graph. So you have, these are all actually different programming languages. So you have the main language, and then it breaks down into the other category, the graphs. So if you actually click in, you can actually see all the different programming languages that are out there. You see this type of graph used with the tree of life a lot of times, where you'll have the different groups, and then it breaks off into the different branches after that point. So this shows immigrations. This is actually immigrations to the United States. So where people are coming from. I actually like this style graph. It's the waveforms. This is in essence a bar graph. This is actually in essence a stacked bar graph. It's just stacked really close together, and then they actually just smooth out the curve. So all right. Let's see if there's one more. Nope, that's all the cool graphs. I'll leave you the last one. A real life bar graph. You can make them with anything. All right. You're done with graphs. Well, we're done with bar graphs, I should say. Any questions? All right. Have a wonderful weekend.